What About Vietnam? A podcast with Gary Newsom. The series where Curry talks with travellers about their experiences and adventures. Find out more about Vietnam from the people who have actually been there.
What about Vietnam?
Whether it's adventure, exploring the culture and cuisine, shopping, or just soaking up the sun. Let Carrie and her travellers pave the way for a magical holiday in Vietnam.
What about Vietnam?
Xin chào and welcome to What About Vietnam. What I love about what I do is I get to meet some great people and I get to learn about some areas in Vietnam that I haven't had a chance to visit. And one of those areas at the top of my list is an area called Mu Cang Chai. And I have the privilege today to be talking to a guy named Jesse Perlman, who was originally inspired to go to this region because of his love of photography, and he's a great fan and has his own page in Instagram featuring some of his photographs. Now, Jesse was sitting in South Korea at the time in 2018. And as I said, motivated to go because he saw all these wonderful images of this region. Now, sometimes these images can be confused with Sapa, as people think this is what they're going to see. And you will see some of them, but certainly not to the level that you will see these kind of vistas as you will in Mu Cang Chai. Now, to do the area justice, Jesse and I agreed it would be a great idea if I introduced the program with just a couple of paragraphs from an article that was written by CNBC and published in their Global Traveller magazine. It's entitled, "Why This Remote Gem Should Top Your 2020 Travel List." So here's just a couple of excerpts from the article. Deep in the valleys forged by the waters of Asia's Red River, a series of colourful mountain villages are encircled by fields of towering rice terraces. The fields are agricultural feats of precision, rugged mountains blanketed with emerald stairways that seemingly ascend to the heavens above. But this is not Disneyland. This isn't a destination designed to attract visitors, international attention, or the Instagram set. Centuries ago, the ancestors of northern Vietnam's local hill tribes created this place of practicality and profound beauty for the most basic of reasons: to survive. Rice thrives in waterlogged conditions, making it ideal for the flooded Mekong Delta at the country's southern tip. To grow rice in vertical conditions, hill tribes created a terrace system to control the downward flow of water. Using ingenuity, resourcefulness, and sheer grunt work, fertile fields of sustenance and breathtaking beauty were born and still flourish today. I thought that small snippet might give everyone some background and help you conjure up those wonderful images that you see and will certainly be using to promote the program. And you're going to find on Jesse's own Instagram page if you want to look further. Please welcome Jesse to the program. I know you're going to enjoy this episode.
Thanks a lot for having me on, Carrie, first of all. I really appreciate it. To answer your question, as was noted in the CNN article, I came upon Mu Cang Chai via Instagram.
There you go.
And I just saw this picture that to me was very fascinating of the steep terraces leading down into a river. And from that moment on, I had been living in South Korea for about a month and didn't really know too much about culture in Vietnam or even Asian culture in general. And to me, that picture that I saw jumped out at me like some sort of mural that you might see in a Chinese restaurant in America. And it looked so otherworldly to me that I knew that this was the place that I needed to go before I left Korea. At the time, I had no idea I was going to be living in Vietnam for 2.5 years. But to answer your question, the internet and Instagram is how I found this place, strangely enough. As is pretty typical with me, I do a lot of research before I travel to places. It just makes me feel prepared and comfortable. That's always kind of been, I take after both my mom and dad in that way. Um, One of the confusing things at first was differentiating Mu Cang Chai from Sapa. You've probably had multiple people on your podcast talk about Sapa, which is the most well-known rice terrace area in the world, I would say, other than perhaps an area in Bali. Um, and what happens often is the Mu Cang Chai pictures will actually be taken and used for websites in Sapa. You'll see this all over Hanoi. There's a beautiful rice paddy made into the shape of a circle, which is famous in Mu Cang Chai. It's known as Mam Soi, Raspberry Hill. But Sapa travel agencies are constantly stealing this photo and labeling it as Sapa. You'll even see postcards in Vietnam that say Sapa Vietnam or magnets, and this is obviously not where it is. So I had to differentiate the two. And once I understood that the place I was interested in was not Sapa, I needed to look for a tour that specialized in the Mu Cang Chai area. So at the time, there were only two or three. And I ended up just going with the one with the best website. And I'm so lucky that I did. I found an organization called Zoni Trip, which is ran by a wonderful woman named Nia Bowie. And Nia was my tour guide. And I sat on the back of her motorbike, the first time I'd ever been on a motorbike in my life. And we drove from Yen Bai City, which was a 2.5 or 3 hour bus ride from Hanoi. And we drove from Yen Bai City to Mu Cang Chai, which takes about 4.5 hours nonstop. So, of course, with the many stops and my awe and fascination of the northern Vietnam roads, it probably took closer to 6 hours, not to mention, stopping for food.
You get to Mu Cang Chai, what happens next?
When we arrived in Mu Cang Chai, it was raining and I was quite downtrodden. I only had a couple of days off from my vacation and I didn't really understand the weather patterns in Mu Cang Chai. Now that I've been going there more often, it's like any mountainous area. The weather can change in a snap of a finger. And so we arrived at one of the more famous areas, the circle rice paddy, Mam Soi, as I was talking about earlier. And we took a trekking route, which takes about 45 minutes to get to that scenic viewpoint. And while we were beginning the route, it was rainy, it was muddy. I was in a horrible mood. I came all this way. I felt like I was going to cry. And right as we entered the area itself, the clouds started parting. And not only did the sun come out, but the low clouds started to hang over the rice, just floating there like a dream. And I, at that point, was well aware that I had gotten everything I'd bargained for and more. And that was my first interaction with the local people of Mu Cang Chai, the Flower Hmong ethnic minority tribe. I had seen some pictures of them, but to be honest, I was much more focused on the landscape going into the trip. I did not expect to meet people dressed the way they did. I thought maybe they might wear their garments for special occasions, not as an everyday occurrence. And I was also really surprised to find out that they, at least the older generation, still does not speak any Vietnamese. They converse in Hmong language.
Yes. And it's an interesting point you bring up about the fact that they wear their colourful clothing as everyday clothing. It's a bit like in India where the women, are cleaning in beautiful, colourful saris. It's the same amongst these people that, they do their everyday work, they carry their babies around and they're all wrapped in this brocade and they are quite colourful, aren't they? And really beautiful, interesting, faces and hair and skin and beautiful eyes and big smiles and obviously welcoming.
Yeah, absolutely. My first impression of Hmong people in Mu Cang Chai was that they're actually a little bit nervous and scared of foreigners because they don't see them that often. They might see Vietnamese people, but foreigners, while they will see them, it's still a little bit rare. But once they get to know you, they're incredibly kind and friendly. And of course, the children are just wonderful. Yeah, and it's very true what you said about their skin. It's these are farmers. These are people that have spent their entire lives out there in the wilderness with the direct sunlight. So there are some women that look like they're in their 90s, but they're only 50 years old because of the conditions that the sun has given them. Obviously, things such as hats, sunglasses, hats maybe, sunglasses and sunscreen are unheard of.
Absolutely. So you spent nearly, 6 hours kind of getting there. What were your plans then from there on? Were you going to stay a day, a week, a fortnight? What was your plans from there?
It was a very short trip because, like I said, I had to get back to my job in Korea. So I let Miss Nia from Zoni Trip take the lead. Once we completed that area, we drove down the highway, which is one of the most beautiful stretches, Highway 32, QL 32, if anyone's interested, looking it up on Google Maps. Quite possibly the most beautiful highway stretch in Vietnam, a 20-kilometer 2-lane road that just goes through the heart of the valley of Mu Cang Chai. And that was the point in which I really just had to sit back and enjoy the moment. We occasionally stopped to take pictures because that, of course, was my passion and the reason why I wanted to go for photography. And we ended the day hiking up a mountain that was completely uninhabited by anybody other than locals. And this mountain had a great view of the sunset, and we were so high up you could see all of the rice terraces above you, below you, and they truly just did seem never ending. It was an absolutely magical experience. So Zoni Trip, the program, kind of combines outdoor exercise as well as cultural exchange, and then of course there's the motorbike component as well. So we really got around and just spent 2 nights there. And after that, it was back to Yen Bai City and then immediately took a bus back to Hanoi. But that's all it took for me. I was hooked.
Okay. And when you say that's all it took to grab your interest, I mean, when you and I were talking the other day, it grabbed your interest in a big way because you made some big changes in your life and decided to go back again. Am I right?
Yeah, I did. I finished my job in Korea about 6 months later and had always planned on doing kind of a big travel before I went back to America. And my first trip was to Vietnam once I completed my job in Korea. And while I was there, I started in the bottom like most foreigners do. I bought a motorbike, which is another pretty common backpacker trend in the southern mountainous region of Dalat, which is pretty close to Ho Chi Minh, maybe 8 hours away in a car, and drove it all the way up to the north. And
Wow.
While I was actually driving, getting close to Hanoi, I got in a nasty motorbike accident. And when I had reached Hanoi, I spoke to my friend Nia from Zoni Trip, and she said to me, if you can make it to my house, me and my husband will take care of you until you're healed. So I took a week out of my trip, which was normally going to be spent exploring the mountains. I stayed with her, and the city was just so quiet and peaceful and such a different experience from not only Seoul, Korea, which I had been living, but just the tourist hostile lifestyle that permeates Vietnam for so many young backpackers. And this was such a true cultural experience. And it was at that time I kind of had the epiphany of, I don't need to go home if I don't want to. I have this ability to teach English anywhere in the world. And a place like Yen Bai, they're probably starving for English teachers. So I had a notion to come back. I left my motorbike with her, and then I continued traveling around Asia. And then I came back to Vietnam in the late summer, early fall, because that was the time of the harvest season in Mu Cang Chai. And that was really where it all started for me. I'd like to point out that a lot of areas in Vietnam will have up to 3 harvest seasons because of the amount of powerful sunlight and heat that they can get. Even some really beautiful places in the north will have 2. But Mu Cang Chai and Sapa are unique that they only have 1 harvest season. The planting begins in May or June, and then the cultivation and the growing will go throughout the summer, and then the rice turns a beautiful golden yellow color in September and October. So I went up to Mu Cang Chai during that time, and that's when everything changed for me because I was no longer staying in the town of Mu Cang Chai, which I would like to point out is inhabited by a different ethnic minority, the Thai people, not Thailand, but the Thai ethnic minority. And these people are actually used to farming on places that are a little more flat. They will sometimes have terrace rice, but in general, the Hmong people are the ones who are more comfortable in the mountainous regions. Thai people also seem to have more experience with hospitality than Hmong people. So that's why they're able to flourish in the town of Mu Cang Chai, but not up in the mountains. So I had been staying there the whole time, and I happened to come upon a little homestay in the middle of nowhere in a village called La Pantan, called Hello Mu Cang Chai Homestay. And it was impossible to find this place. And once I did, I realized that it was on a really, really steep hill that could really get anybody out of breath. A person in great shape, still super out of breath, climbing this hill just to get to the homestay. And once I arrived at the top of that mountain, my breath was just taken away. It was not only one of the best views in the whole region, but without doubt the most beautiful place I've ever stayed in my life. And this is also where I met a woman named Miss Lee. And Lee was the co-owner of Hello Mu Cang Chai Homestay. And to that point, the first English speaker I had ever met in Mu Cang Chai. So this was the beginning of a long friendship and also a really great opportunity for me to just ask questions about what's going on here. What are the people like? What do you do? How did you learn English? By the way, it turns out that she learned English in Sapa, which is, of course, a more touristic region. She went there as kind of a training program. She worked at a cafe, saw that homestays were popping up left and right, and told her husband, hey, we got to do one of these back home. So they bought the land, and they live on a mountaintop in one of the most beautiful places in the world.
So that homestay that you've just described, they built that from scratch?
They did build it from scratch. It was a community effort. They went door to door in their community, and they asked people if they would be willing to help construct this homestay. They borrowed money from the bank to get the materials, and then the entire village came together and built a very, very small concrete road leading up to the homestay, which if you're very brave, you can take with your motorbike. And then they built the house where the family lives, and then upstairs, like many homestays, where the guests are situated, and a kitchen as well. Now, in a commune like La Pantan, it's a situation where you might ask one day your friends or your neighbors or a family member to help pick your rice, because it is kind of a ticking time bomb. You need to pick the rice when it's ready to be picked, or else it will go bad. And then instead of asking for money or anything like that, you're just expected to owe the other person something. So 2 weeks later, their rice might be ready to be picked, and you need to go help them, or you need to send your son or daughter over there to help them. Or maybe they need to borrow your water buffalo to help plow the field. So this is kind of the system that they used in order to build this homestay. They did it completely from hand, definitely no true equipment, which is pretty similar to the region itself. It's the only region that I'm aware of that does not use any real electronic equipment to cultivate rice. A lot of these other places have, these kind of almost like wood chopper type machines where you put the rice in and the grains come out. The people of Mu Cang Chai, they hold the rice, the picked rice, like a baseball bat, and they bang it against a wooden box until all the rice drops into the bottom. And then they bag it up, and they either carry it on their back, which is a 50-kilogram weight, or they put it on the back of their motorbike, 2 or 3 at a time, and drive it up a scary mountain at night with no lights. At the time that I discovered Hello Mu Cang Chai, I believe the year was 2018. And the village that they were living in, La Pantan, the year before when I went on that tour, did not have paved roads. So the experience was just as muddy and miserable as it was climbing to that scenic viewpoint on that morning. At this point, though, they did have some paved roads, and it was like going to a completely new place. I could pass, and that was really wonderful. And yeah, you do see now, year after year, the Vietnamese government, they give them the supplies, but once again, it's on the Hmong people to create the roads themselves.
Yeah, and we were talking about that from a skill set perspective, that, you know, that they literally come up with those skills with a little bit of guidance from the government, but the work and the grunt is all community-based, isn't it?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. You want to talk about the term country strong. I mean, these people just do it all like it's nothing. I remember that Lee, the mother, she gave her beautiful 3-year-old daughter a toy, and I put toy in quotation marks because the toy was a gardening hoe, and she let her just play with it, and then went on to tell me that when she's 5 years old, she'll go out into the fields with her mom every day.
Yeah, yeah. And so you decided to hang around, didn't you? You sort of got to know the families and the people that ran the homestay, and we talked a little bit about that. So talk to us now. I mean, here you are, you know, young, good-looking guy. You're in Mu Cang Chai, Vietnam. Like, what apart from all of that lovely community feeling, what was it that really kept you there? Like,
everything that was written in that CNN article, but most importantly, the lack of tourism. I loved how quiet it was. And this is something that we have discussed previously, you and I, but I think it's very important. I love the fact that there aren't a lot of tourists in Mu Cang Chai. The people of Mu Cang Chai do not love that. We have opposite goals. So their goal is to get rich and have as many people. They would love nothing more than it to become Sapa. Of course, they do have a great deal of respect for nature and conserving nature, but they want that. Whereas me, the tourist, generally just loves that there aren't that many people there. So I love the quietness of it. You just really feel like you're out there. The nature, it's one of those places that any time of year that you go, something special is going on. In February, they have the peach and cherry blossom trees, just a sea of pink and white. In March and April, you might see purple, fluorescent purple flowers blooming from the what would be barren rice paddy fields. And then, of course, from May to October, you have the planting of the rice itself. And right before that, they actually plant corn for themselves as well. So there's always something going on. And what I really love about Mu Cang Chai is you can just sit there and watch the people and their little dots in the landscape. And they're all working. You can hear the echoes of the banging of the rice onto the board. You hear the cowbells of the buffalo. You see the children running along the road holding hands in their beautiful clothing. Everything just kind of feels like a National Geographic magazine when you're there.
And like, you couldn't have described it better. I haven't heard it described so well. So thanks, Jesse. You're doing a great job at painting the right picture of this place. But I think one of the other things I want us to just expand on, because you and I are both in the same space or headspace, I guess, in the fact that we want people to know about this area. So I'm hoping, if there's any good to come out of COVID, that somewhere in tourism in Vietnam, when it does come back on, that, there is some controls or mediation, or just, I don't want to see big buses coming to Yen Bai City and then, there's a whole lot of trolleying up those roads. And, now we're seeing no dotted people in the landscape and in the terraces. We're seeing, hundreds and hundreds of tourists trolling around. So it's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts on that. You do see it. Last year I was there, and of course there was still COVID. No foreign tourists, but lots of Vietnamese tourists. And every district, or excuse me, every province in Vietnam has a different license plate number. And Yen Bai is the 21. So I always used to joke to my friends when we were in Mu Cang Chai, the 30s are here, and 30 is the Hanoi license plate. So when the 30s come out, they come out in droves, and they are all over this one main road. And it hasn't ever gotten to the point where there's traffic on the highway, but I could see it happening in the future. The other thing is, I totally agree with what you said about not wanting this place to be tainted by all of the extra tourism. But at the current moment, I do think that that's pretty much impossible. I have a lot of friends who are like-minded who I just can't convince to go because it's too far for them. From Hanoi, especially if you want to go on a weekend. I mean, I know people who go and they have, 12 hours there, and then they go back. And the driving both ways is 16 hours. So they just don't have the infrastructure in place. I did read an interesting article about how the government is planning to increase tourism there by 2025, including an extension off of the superhighway that runs from Hanoi to the northern border of Lao Cai. And according to the article that I read, it will be able to connect you to Mu Cang Chai in just 4 hours from Hanoi. Now, that's certainly a more manageable trip. That's Boston to New York for those Americans listening out there. But at the moment, it's really just too far off the beaten path, I think, for it to be a really big tourist destination. Photography enthusiasts, trekking enthusiasts, these are the people who usually make their way to Mu Cang Chai. Most people would love to go, but don't have enough time. Or if they do go, they kind of end up stumbling on it. Like, oh, well, we were going to drive to Sapa, and we realized this place was on the way. And you know what? We think this place is more beautiful than Sapa. And that's usually what I try to tell people is, and I'm sure that's what you're trying to tell people on your podcast. Just go. Trust me. Just go. If you go, you will love it.
Thank you for listening. Check out the episode notes for more information.
What about Vietnam?
Don't forget to subscribe, rate and review, and stay tuned for more fun adventures in Vietnam.
What about Vietnam?